So now to the most, at least in my opinion, exciting part of the synth, the modulations. The modulations can be easily connected in this synth via drag and drop, or you can put them in yourself here in the matrix sections. Modulations means that your synth will change the sound over time depending on what you want. For example, if I play a key and turn the cutoff knob, then you will hear a change in the sound. That could be cool, and you can easily do this manually if you hook it up to a hardware controller, or if you produce an automation track and draw the changes in with your pencil, then you can easily do this. But you can also let your synth do this for you all the time. And therefore we have our modulators. These are mostly LFOs, and LFOs produce a wave all the time with the type that you choose and with a certain shape and with a certain frequency, which can be synchronized to your host, of course, but can also be put in with a frequency button in Hertz. So how does this work and what can you do with it? It is actually really simple once you get how this works. In the default setting, the modulators basically look like this. The shape is at 0 and the waveform is a sine wave. So now the modulator 1, so my LFO1, which is, by the way, a low frequency oscillator for everyone who wants to look up what this is, it produces a sine wave. And this wave can modulate mostly all of the knobs inside my synth. So that means change these knobs while you play. And a super easy example of how this can work is, you see these three lines here and also here. If you grab these and drag this anywhere, then a target gets shown by a green color. And if you now drop your source, then you can see down here in the matrix, these two are hooked up. And now what happens is the LFO number 1 constantly changes the panorama. And that means you can already hear it. That means depending on the wave type, my shape or the frequency I put in, the panorama is now constantly changing between left and right. But I don't have to do it manually myself. The synth does it on its own, like so. Another really easy example would be, I again take my modulator and drag it onto the cutoff. And now what you hear is the same as I would go like this and change the cutoff constantly with the same frequency. If you don't like your modulation, you just right-click and use clear modulation or clear all modulations. So that is the basic concept. What's really even more interesting in doing this is you can nest these modulators into each other. That means right now my LFO number 3 is modulating the panorama, and therefore I used a little bit a weird curve. That is a square curve, and I changed the shape so that is not that predictable. But still, after 2 or 3 repeats, you know what's going on. So to change that, I go here to my modifier and choose LFO number 2. You hear what happened? Now my LFO number 3 modulates my panorama, but my LFO number 2 modulates my LFO number 3 while this is modulating my panorama, and therefore the outcome is very different and pretty exciting for that really easy thing we did here. The outcome is kind of spectacular. And if I now change my cutoff as well, or I use my LFO number 4 on the resonance button and I use a negative envelope setting, and use my LFO number 4 to modulate LFO number 1, then you can see how crazy the sounds become that you can produce with using your modulations. One more thing you can do in your matrix section is you have 4 pages of 4 columns where you can sign up modulators to modulate destinations. And if you look in the drop down, then you will see that there is way more possibilities than you would think, because it's also possible to use the different sliders of your envelope, or to even use parts of your arpeggiator or of note expression, or even simple MIDI controller data like velocity, pitch bend, modulation wheel or aftertouch to change the outcome of your modulators inside the matrix. And right next to your source or your modifier and the destination, you also have a offset and depth slider where you can change the offset of your source, and the depth of your modifier. All in all, you can come up with crazy sound ideas really easy by using the modulators and the matrix section. To show you how this can work, I produced a little track and therefore used synth sounds with modulators. Again, this is not a perfect example, it's just the sounds that I came up with while I was doing the video. So I hope you're okay with this. It's a little dark, the track, but I think for the purpose of showing what you can do with not a lot of work you put into your sounds, I think it's pretty okay. So all in all, it sounds like this. And therefore I have this tiny sound with a delay which is kind of squeaky, and my high part of the melody, I have a pretty normal bass synth, and I have two modulated synth sounds which are this one and a high pedal tone. And all what you can hear happens inside my synth. You see, I just have one long note here. Everything else is just modulators. So in the end, I want to show two more tricks inside this synth which are really cool, and these work like this. If you're not comfortable in turning knobs like this, or it's a little bit too complicated right now at the moment, or your mouse is not working very good like so, you can change every button into a slider just by holding down Alt or Option, and that makes working sometimes way more comfortable. And trick number 2 is also really cool, and it works like this. You can hook up almost any button inside this synth to your modulation wheel, which is really cool because then you can change any sound you want by using the modulation wheel of your hardware controller inside this synth in real time. And it is super easy. It goes like this. You right click the button and you go to modulation wheel and say enable modulation wheel. And now you see, if you turn your modulation wheel, the cutoff button turns as well. And that alone wouldn't be very exciting, because you can do that as well, for example, in a modulator or for a quick control or for an automation track. But what's really cool is you can hook up different things to your modulation wheel at the same time. And that, I think, is really a nice thing to have in a synth if you're the type that wants to have control via a hardware controller. Then this is really a huge time saver. Just right click any button, go to modulation wheel and enable it, and then you can change this button with your modulation wheel, and now you see all the 3 knobs that I hooked up I can turn now with one tool, and you can easily disable it, and then just 2 knobs are turning. So that is it. I hope you found these helpful. If you didn't understand everything or you still have questions about the other parts of the synth, then check out the other videos I made about functions of a synth.